Hi guys, it's Ryan here with Sigma Survival, and today's video is about why you are probably carrying the wrong tourniquet. Okay guys, so tourniquets. Most people that I see online, most preppers, most survivalists, just about everyone is carrying some kind of tactical type tourniquet. Now, for long-term survival situations, I definitely agree that they're useful to have, okay? A tourniquet has one use when it comes to, emergency sort of medicine, and that is to stop bleeding. But what about if there's tools that can be used for more than just tourniqueting? For example, a cat tourniquet it's combat proven, it's a great bit of kit. It's got one use, and that is to stop bleeding. There's no other uses of a cat tourniquet, generally speaking. But if you take a blood pressure cuff now, yeah, you wasn't expecting that, I imagine. A blood pressure cuff can definitely be used for multiple purposes and everyday uses. You can take someone's blood pressure regardless of what's wrong with them. It's a really useful bit of kit to have. In the same way, if you've seen my other videos, you know that multi-tools are something that I really like to carry for survival. So the medical multi-tool, if you've seen some of my other videos, just a flat piece of elastic. It's my go-to tool that I carry all the time. It's a tourniquet, but it can be used as so many other things. Something like a cat tourniquet, this is a knockoff replica type one. It still works just as well. It's just you do run the risk that the plastic lanyard might snap at some point, so use them at your own risk. I mean, I just use them for training more than anything, but they come in these nice little pouches. These were made for the battlefield. They're made for single-handed use, so you can get it on your arm or your leg quick. Use one arm, one hand to put this on. They're combat proven, but they're made for warfare. They're made for the battlefield. They're made for, gunshot wounds, shrapnel, blast injuries, traumatic amputations. They've also been used in the civilian setting in RTCs, things like that. Any kind of limb exsanguination, any type of bleed in the limbs. The problem is this only has one use, generally speaking, and that's, major trauma. You don't want to be using this on a minor scratch, trust me, or, even like an oozing venous bleed, where the vein's been nicked but not the artery, because you're probably running the risk of making things worse. So what would I recommend? Right here, I've got a blood pressure cuff, an aneroid manual blood pressure cuff, okay? This is, generally speaking, an effective tourniquet. This is what it is, it tourniquets. As soon as you get to a certain level of pressure, it actually just bites down. It puts pressure against the artery and the long bone, which is, the humerus here, or the femur or the tibia, or wherever it is that you're taking the reading. And it stops the blood going down, it stops the venous return, it tourniquets effectively. This has been used in the civilian sector for years. It's been used in surgical settings for years as a hemostasis tool to stop bleeding. And guess what? This is probably one of the tools that I've used most in my medical jobs, over the years. I've used this on pretty much every patient that I see, unless it's something that's really not warranting that or they refuse. But generally speaking, being able to take a blood pressure reading is really super useful. Something like a cat tourniquet, or even, any type of traumatic injury tourniquet, they're very good to have, don't get me wrong, but it's taking up vital space. That this is not much bigger. It's definitely around about the same weight, and it's got multiple uses. I can take vital information from a patient. I can use this in more of a civilian friendly manner. In the emergency room, they'll use this temporarily to sort a bleeding wound out, and then they'll release it. In fact, it was put in a medical manual. Let me just quote that. So this comes from the Tinternalis Emergency Medicine Manual. You can get that for free online as a PDF. Can't remember where I got it from. I'm not going to post it in the description because it's copyrighted and whatnot. I don't want to be treading on anyone's toes. But let me just read out what it says about using a blood pressure cuff as a tourniquet. So it was in a section called hemostasis, about, controlling bleeding. Finger tourniquets or a blood pressure cuff placed proximal, which is above, to the injury, and inflated above the systolic blood pressure, that just means it's tight enough that it restricts blood flow, will control bleeding. The duration of the tourniquet use should be minimized and not left in place for more than 20 to 30 minutes at a time. So what they're saying is basically that you should use a blood pressure cuff on a bleeding wound in a limb somewhere, and essentially, you know, deal with that wound within the space of 20 minutes, 30 minutes max. They release that tourniquet in the emergency room once they've packed that wound full of gauze, once they've stitched it, once they've tied off, you know, blood vessels and whatnot. For the average person watching this, you would probably want to use some kind of tourniquet, like a blood pressure cuff in that respect, to stop that bleeding. You would pack that wound full of gauze, put a pressure dressing on it, release the tourniquet. If it stops the bleeding, happy days. That probably will be enough for most injuries. Some direct pressure, some wound packing, you know, you're good to go. So you probably think that you need a stethoscope like what I'm wearing here. You actually don't, believe it or not. A little tip and trick is that you can just wait for the dial to start wiggling on the number as it's being slowly released. So it basically, how it works is the dial works its way up and around to wherever the blood pressure is, and then as you go above that, you start releasing, and as the needle comes down, it'll start to wiggle at a certain point. Maybe it's there, maybe it's here, and it will continue to do that until you get to the diastolic. So the top, when it starts, that's the systolic number, the top number. Once it gets to here, that's the diastolic. So if it was there, it would be 140 over, let's say, I think that's 80 or something like that, 90. So you don't actually need this. If you want to have this as well, this is also a useful tool, which actually isn't too hard to use in a basic sense for basic tasks. Obviously, I'm not saying, you know, you should go out and get a stethoscope and pretend that you're a trained medical professional. That's not what you should do. And if you're not trained to use it, you might misdiagnose things. But getting some basic training on how to use this as well, you know, they come with the kits. So they're useful just for hearing if, let's say we're talking about trauma now, because we're talking about tourniquets, right? Having a stethoscope that you can put against someone's chest, you know, you can hear if they've got a breath going into their lungs. If they don't have a breath going into their lungs, what have they got? A collapsed lung. So now we've got something else to worry about, or not worry about, because we can hear the breath sounds, okay? Anyway, not too much more about stethoscopes, but like I say, a good blood pressure cuff like this one will serve its purpose well. You will use this time and time and time again. They're generally pretty accurate, more so than the electric ones. If you have got an electric one, you could just wait for it to inflate and then the bleeding stops, and then you could just clamp down on the rubber hose, and that would probably clamp down on that as a tourniquet. But yeah, I really think that most people are getting it kind of wrong in some respects. I mean, I'm not saying that tactical type tourniquets are bad, but I think that this has a whole host of other uses for everyday things. Whether if I'm treating dehydration or heart failure, or, you know, trauma from a gunshot wound, or someone's fallen down a ridge and, you know, I'm checking for internal bleeding, infections, just about everything I need to take a blood pressure reading for. And you should as well. You know, don't rely on going to the hospital or whatever for your blood pressure readings. Learn how to do this. This is a useful skill. You know, it's a survival skill. And this piece of kit right here folds down to practically nothing. It's practically the same weight as a cat tourniquet. It's slightly bulkier, but you won't even notice it's in your backpack. You know, so I highly, highly, highly recommend a blood pressure cuff, an aneroid manual blood pressure cuff. Let's get on to another option. So another thing as well is that these are quite expensive. Now, they are very, very good, don't get me wrong. They're very, very good. You know, single-handed application, combat proven, but we can improvise a tourniquet. It's not going to be as good as this, and this is good, but just getting a piece of wood or a piece of pipe, anything that's rigid that can work as a windlass, and then some kind of tie. So that could be a tie that you pull off your dress suit. It could be you tear the sleeve off your shirt and turn that into a tie. You know, something that you wrap around the limb, tie on. You tie this on too, twist it, secure it. That's a tourniquet done. Another skill that most people have lost touch with because they're so dependent on these. So I'm not slating cat tourniquets, I'm not slating SWAT T tourniquets, I'm not slating any kind of tactical tourniquet, but let's look at it from a contextual basis, guys. If you're looking at surviving long term, this has a single use. You might be able to stretch it and improvise it into 1 or 2 other uses, but a blood pressure cuff, you're going to use that for everyday tasks, everyday medical admin. Taking blood pressures is super, super useful. And guess what? You can use it as a tourniquet. You could put it over a wound directly to apply extra pressure as well once you've put your dressing on, you know, things like this. So yeah, I hope that's useful. I mean, obviously, you know, it's a bit of a controversial topic. I'll probably get a lot of stick for saying that people shouldn't have these. Didn't say that though, did I? I said that people should, you know, prioritize a blood pressure cuff over this. This is also good to have, but everyone bangs on about tactical tourniquets all the time, and no one's really looking at what they can use a blood pressure cuff for. You know, it's got a lot more uses. So, and also it's easier to use. Everyone knows how to pump a blood pressure cuff. Generally speaking, you know, you could give it to a kid and they're going to know how to use it. That's another thing, isn't it? Like, imagine you've got, you know, young kids and you've got an injury that you can't treat. You know, you can generally say to them, put that on, squeeze, squeeze, squeeze. You know, they're going to be able to do that much easier than they're going to be, you know, working this fiddly sort of thing right here. So yeah, just food for thought, guys. Let me know in the comments what you think. Obviously, you know, generally speaking, I'm just drawing on my medical experience. 1% of the time you're going to be looking at using this. 99% of the time you're going to be looking at using your aneroid blood pressure cuff for daily medical tasks. And you can also use that for traumatic injuries, as the emergency medicine doctors, you know, have put in their manual. So yeah, let me know in the comments what you think. Like I say, I'm not slating these, I'm just giving you another option that's way more practical. Please do like and subscribe, it really helps the channel to grow. And yeah, remember, you don't need a stethoscope with that blood pressure cuff, but if you want to look cool and you know how to use it or want to learn how to use it, definitely recommend that as well. Anyway, yeah, thanks for watching, and until next time.